Hey everyone, hope you're doing great. Welcome back to my channel. In today's video, we'll dive into what if Deku was chosen as the next Nova Corps commander. Smash that subscribe button, and be sure to peek at the description below. Let's begin. The air in the unforeseen simulation joint was thick with the coppery tang of blood and the acrid stench of ozone. It was a cacophony of panic screams, defiant shouts, and the sickening, wet thuds of bodies hitting the ground. For Izuku Midoriya, crouched behind a half-shattered fountain in the central plaza, the chaos had resolved into a single, terrifying focal point. It wasn't Tamura Shigaraki, the man-child with hands decorating his body, whose petulant scratching and gleeful pronouncements of "game over" sent shivers down Izuku's spine. It wasn't the Warp Gate villain, Kurojiiri, whose misty form was an unsolvable enigma. It was the thing they had brought with them. The thing they called Nomu. This one was different from the hulking brute he had read about in the incident reports from Hosa's city. This one was leaner, its exposed brain pulsating with a sickly purple light instead of a dull gray. Its skin was the color of a deep bruise, shot through with veins that glowed with captured energy. Its intelligence was the most horrifying part. It wasn't a mindless puppet. It moved with a chilling economy, a predator's grace that belied its grotesque form. Aizawa-sensei, his erasure quirk flickering as he was forced to blink, was already sporting a dislocated shoulder and a lattice of deep cuts. The Nomu had learned his timing. It's adapting, Izuku muttered, his pencil flying across a half-soaked page in his hero notebook. He, Tsuyu Ajiri, and Minoru Mineta had been warped to the shipwreck zone, but had fought their way back to the plaza, only to witness this slaughter. It's not just nullifying quirks, it's absorbing the kinetic energy. Every punch Aizawa-sensei dodges makes it stronger. Every attack it blocks fuels it. So we can't hit it? Mineta whimpered, his teeth chattering so hard it was a miracle they didn't shatter. Worse, Tsuyu said, her voice a low, grim ribbit. It seems to be redirecting it. Look, she pointed. 13, valiant and resolute, stood their ground near the entrance, trying to protect the students who had managed to escape the initial villain blitz. My quirk is absolute, they declared, activating Black Hole. The familiar vortex of gravitational force spun to life at their fingertip. The new Nomu, which Shigaraki had gleefully dubbed the Void Nomu, simply turned its head. It raised a hand palm open. The glowing purple veins on its arm flared violently. Instead of being pulled in, the very fabric of 13's quirk seemed to snag. The vortex wavered, and a stream of its dark energy was siphoned away, flowing like a river into the Nomu's palm. Oh, you thought you could just suck him up? Shigaraki cackled, scratching his neck with feverish intensity. No, that's his party trick. He's a final boss, you see. He takes your ultimate move and makes it his. With a guttural roar, the Void Nomu clenched its fist. The energy it had absorbed coalesced into a sphere of crackling darkness. It hurled the sphere not at 13, but at the ground just in front of them. The impact didn't create a crater. It created a shockwave of pure concussive force that threw the space hero back 20 feet, their suit tearing at the seams. They crashed into the far wall and didn't move. A collective gasp went through the remaining students. Hope, a fragile commodity, was being systematically dismantled before their eyes. Izuku's heart hammered against his ribs. He can absorb and weaponize quirks. Not steal them like All for One, but metabolize them. He's a living power converter. There's no weakness. No opening. Not even All Might. The thought died in his throat. All Might wasn't here. A frantic call from Ida, who had managed to escape, had confirmed the heroes were on their way, but every second felt like an eternity. For now they were alone. The Nomu dispatched Aizawa with a final, brutal blow. It didn't crush his skull as the first had tried to do. It simply grabbed his leg, absorbed the momentum of his kick, and used that amplified force to slam him into the concrete, leaving him a broken, unconscious heap. Teacher is down for the count, Shigaraki announced, spreading his arms wide. Now, for the little NPCs. The Void Nomu turned its blank, pitiless eyes toward the remaining cluster of students, Kirishima, Bakugo, Todoroki, all panting, bruised, but ready to fight to the last. It took a step, its foot cracking the stone beneath it. That was when the sky broke. It started as a sound, a high-pitched, metallic scream that tore through the air, overriding all other noise. It wasn't the roar of a jet or the rumble of thunder. It was the sound of something fundamental coming apart. Everyone, hero and villain alike, looked up. A new star had appeared in the artificial sky of the USJ. A blazing, golden comet, trailing fire and shedding pieces of incandescent metal. It grew larger with impossible speed, a second, more malevolent point of red light right behind it, firing angry crimson bolts that streaked past the golden one. "What the hell is that?" Bakugo snarled, his awe warring with his rage. "Kurogiri. Did you do this?" Shigaraki demanded, his voice pitching high with irritation. "No, Tamura Shigaraki," the warped villain replied, his yellow eyes wide with genuine surprise. "This is unscheduled." The golden object, now clearly a craft of some kind, sleek, aerodynamic, unlike any plane Izuku had ever seen, was out of control. It spiraled downwards, smoke and golden energy pouring from a massive gash in its side. The dome of the USJ, a marvel of engineering, offered no resistance. With a deafening shriek of tearing plexiglass and groaning steel, the ship punched through the roof as if it were tissue paper. Time seemed to slow. Shards of the dome, glittering like a deadly rain, fell around them. The ship, trailing a plume of black smoke, cartwheeled through the air and slammed into the mountain zone with a cataclysmic impact that shook the entire facility. The ground bucked, throwing everyone off balance. For a moment, there was a stunned, absolute silence, broken only by the crackle of fires from the crash site. Then, the second object entered. It wasn't a ship so much as a nightmare given form. It was a biomechanical horror, a jagged thing of black chitin and pulsing red viscera, shaped like a predatory insect. It hovered malevolently in the gaping hole in the roof, its single, glowing red eye scanning the devastation below. A hatch hissed open on its underbelly, and a creature dropped to the ground. It landed with a wet crunch, unfolding itself to its full height of 8 feet. It was a mockery of a bipedal form, with reverse-jointed legs, a carapace of obsidian armor, and 2 scythe-like arms that twitched with murderous intent. Its head was a featureless wedge of chitin, save for the same baleful red optic that glowed with cold, alien hatred. A chitinous stalker. The villains were frozen, staring at this new player on the field. Shigaraki looked like a child whose favorite toy had been snatched away. "Who invited you?" "This is my stage." From the wreckage of the golden ship, a ramp lowered with a hydraulic sigh. A figure stumbled out, bathed in the glow of the internal fires. He was tall, clad in a deep blue and gold uniform that was torn and scorched. A helmet of ornate gold metal covered his head, its star-shaped sigil flickering weakly. He clutched a wound in his side, from which golden, blood-like energy trickled between his fingers. He collapsed to one knee, panting heavily. The chitinous stalker let out a chittering screech and began to advance on the wounded alien pilot. But it wasn't the only one moving. The Void Nomu, its head cocked, took a step in the same direction. Its purple veins pulsed faster. It recognized a power source. A new, exotic, and potent one. The stalker and the Nomu saw each other. A silent challenge passed between the two monsters. The stalker hissed, brandishing its scythe arms. The Nomu let out a low growl, its muscles tensing. They were 2 predators fighting over the same kill. The Nomu, bigger and seemingly more powerful, took another step, placing itself between the stalker and the downed pilot. It had claimed him. "No, no, no!" Shigaraki stamped his foot like a petulant child. "Bad Nomu! The target is the students. Kill the kids. Ignore the space hobo." The Nomu ignored him. Its programming was simple: neutralize threats, and this new, wounded being radiated an energy that its very existence craved. It reached a massive hand towards the kneeling alien, and that's when Izuku Midoriya's body moved. He didn't think. There was no analysis, no frantic scribbling, no weighing of pros and cons. There was only the core, immutable programming of his own soul. A person is in trouble. "Midoriya, you idiot, get back here!" Bakugo's roar was distant, drowned out by the thunder in Izuku's ears. "Problem child, no!" Aizawa's voice, faint and broken, tried to reach him. He didn't hear them. Green lightning crackled around him, the raw, untamed power of one for all flooding his limbs. He knew it would break him. He didn't care. He launched himself from behind the fountain, a green blur of pure, reckless heroism. He wasn't aiming to fight. He was aiming to save. He slammed into the Noma's side with a 5% Detroit smash. It was like punching a mountain. The force barely staggered the creature, but it was enough to divert its attention for a precious second. The bones in Izuku's right arm screamed in protest, but didn't shatter. Not yet. He landed in a crouch between the Nomu and the alien warrior, his arms spread wide in a protective stance. "Get away from him!" he gasped, his body trembling with the strain of containing one for all. The alien looked up. Through the visor of his helmet, Izuku could see a pair of tired, weary eyes widen in surprise. The Void Nomu was not surprised. It was annoyed. It swatted Izuku aside with the back of its hand. The blow was casual, dismissive, but it carried the force of a freight train. Izuku flew through the air, his vision tunneling, and crashed hard against the base of the wrecked fountain. The world swam in a haze of pain, the taste of blood filling his mouth. His ribs felt like a bag of broken glass. "Deku-kun!" Uraraka's cry was one of pure terror. The Nomu turned back to its prize. But as it reached down, the alien pilot, Roman Day of the Nova Corps, did something unexpected. He looked past the monster, his gaze locking onto the crumpled, green-haired boy who had just tried to shield him. He saw the crackling green energy, the self-destructive power born of a desperate need to protect. He saw the look in Izuku's eyes, not of a soldier, not of a warrior, but of a true hero. Through the pain and the encroaching darkness of his own demise, Day saw a light. A brilliant, defiant spark in a universe that was rapidly falling to darkness. "He shines," Day thought, a sense of awe cutting through his agony. Like the first nova. Like the very beginning, the Noma's shadow fell over him. Its massive, three-fingered hand closed around his helmet, intending to rip it from his head. But Day acted first. With the last of his strength, he twisted, slipping out of the Noma's clumsy grasp, and scrambled on his hands and knees. Not away, but towards Izuku. "What is he doing?" Shigaraki shrieked, now utterly bewildered. Day crawled the few feet to where Izuku was trying to push himself up, his body refusing to obey. The Nomu was right behind him, its footsteps like drumbeats of doom. Day reached Izuku. He grabbed the front of the boy's torn pea uniform, his voice a desperate, rasping whisper. "You're light, it's pure." The Nomu grabbed Izuku from behind, its powerful hand wrapping around his torso. The pressure was immense, squeezing the air from his lungs. His freshly broken ribs ground together in excruciating agony. He let out a choked scream. "Let him go!" Day roared, a commander's authority returning to his voice for one last moment. He looked into Izuku's pain-filled, terrified eyes. There was no time for explanations. No time for legacies or long goodbyes. There was only the act. The transfer. The desperate, final gamble of a dying core. With a grunt of effort, Roman Day pulled his helmet off his own head and, in one swift, fluid motion, jammed it onto Izuku Midoriya's. It was too big. It slid down, the rim covering Izuku's eyes. For a split second, the universe went dark and silent. And then, it exploded. Connection established. User biometric scan in progress. Human. Male. Approximate age, 16 Terran cycles. Quirk factor detected. Unknown energy signature coexistent. Cross-referencing. Anomaly. A voice, calm, ancient, and utterly alien, echoed not in his ears, but in the very center of his consciousness. It was a voice made of a billion voices, a chorus of data and experience. Day's grip on his uniform was the last thing he felt from the outside world. The dying Centurion's eyes were filled with a strange, fierce hope. He uttered his final command, a prayer to the ghost in the machine he was about to unleash. "World mind," he whispered, his voice barely audible over the Noma's guttural growl. "Designate successor. Transfer the Nova Force. Live, for all of us. Command override accepted. Roman Day, Centurion 101244. Final protocol initiated. Transferring full repository. Transferring Prime Centurion authority. Transferring the Nova Force." the world inside Izuku's head became a supernova. A torrent of information, of history, of a billion years of knowledge and the collective consciousness of the Xandarian race slammed into his mind. He saw the birth of stars and the death of galaxies. He saw golden ships policing 1,000 worlds. He saw a proud, gleaming city called Xandar. He saw peace, then he saw darkness. A tide of living hunger. A swarm that blotted out the stars. He saw Xandar burn, he saw the Nova Corps die, he saw a billion souls extinguished in an instant. The grief, the loss, the terror, it was his. It flooded him, threatened to drown his very being, and then, he felt another power rise up to meet it. Deep within him, one for all, the sacred torch passed down through generations, roared to life. It was a power born of hope, of sacrifice, of the will to stand against overwhelming evil. It met the cosmic despair of the world mind not as an enemy, but as an ally. The stockpiled energy of 8 heroes surged, not fighting the Nova Force, but embracing it, fueling it, synergizing with it. The green lightning of One for All met the golden energy of the Nova Force. And they merged. Outside, the effect was apocalyptic. The first thing that happened was the light. A column of blinding, incandescent energy erupted from Izuku's body. It was not green, not gold, but a swirling, divine fusion of both. A Vidian comet born in the heart of the USJ. The light was so intense it bleached all other color from the world, casting stark, dancing shadows. The Noma holding him was the first to go. It didn't scream. It didn't explode. The creature designed to absorb and redirect energy was confronted with a power that was not of its universe, a power that was both physical and something more. The Vidian light touched its skin and it simply came apart. Its cells, its molecules, its very atoms were unwritten from existence. One moment, it was a terrifying monster. The next, it was a cloud of dissolving dust, vaporized into nothingness. Shigaraki screamed, a sound of pure, unadulterated terror and disbelief, shielding his eyes. What? Cheater! That's a hack! The energy expanded outwards in a single, silent, devastating pulse. It wasn't an explosion of fire and shrapnel. It was a wave of pure, kinetic force and cosmic energy. It struck the chitinous stalker. The alien monster, which had been watching with cold indifference, was lifted from its feet and slammed backwards. Its obsidian carapace, which had deflected energy bolts in space, cracked and shattered like glass. It was flung out of the massive hole in the dome, a broken toy cast aside. The wave hit the remaining villains. Kurogiri tried to warp them away, but the energy pulse disrupted his quirk, his misty form flickering and destabilizing. He and Shigaraki were sent tumbling, slammed into the far wall with enough force to render them unconscious. The wave washed over the students and the fallen heroes. But here, the energy was different. It was still powerful, but it felt gentle, protective. It was a shield, not a sword. It lifted them softly, pushing them away from the epicenter, depositing them in a heap far from the blast zone. They felt a warmth spread through them, a strange sense of peace amidst the terror. And then the wave hit the dome. The entire structure of the unforeseen simulation joint groaned, the sound of a dying leviathan. The 500,000 square feet of reinforced plexiglass and steel, already weakened, couldn't withstand the pressure. With a final, deafening crack that echoed for miles, the entire roof of the USJ disintegrated. The artificial environments, the mountains, the rivers, the plazas, were suddenly opened to the clear blue sky. Sunlight, real and unfiltered, streamed down for the first time, illuminating the scene of utter devastation. In the center of it all, the light faded. Izuku Midoriya hung in the air for a single, impossible moment, his body limp, suspended in the eye of the storm. The green and gold energy receded, flowing back into him, leaving only the faint afterimages burned into the retinas of all who had witnessed it. Then, gravity reasserted itself. He fell the last few feet to the ground, landing in a crumpled heap. The golden helmet, now silent, slid from his head and clattered onto the cracked stone beside him, the sound unnaturally loud in the sudden, profound silence. For a long moment, nobody moved. The students, wide-eyed and trembling, stared at the unconscious form of their classmate. Bakugo was on his knees, his hands smoking, his expression a mixture of fury, confusion, and a terrifying new emotion he couldn't name. It looked almost like fear. Todoroki stood rigid, his left side steaming, his right side frosted over, simply staring at the spot where the Nomu had ceased to exist. Uraraka had her hands over her mouth, tears streaming down her face. The silence was broken by a new sound. A powerful, booming laugh that was strained with worry. "I am here!" All Might landed with the force of a small meteor, his very presence a bomb on the terrified students' souls. But his signature smile was gone. His eyes took in the scene, the obliterated dome, the unconscious villains, his two fallen colleagues, the scattered and wounded students, and at the very center of it all, young Midoriya. Unconscious. Laying next to a strange, golden helmet. All Might's gaze swept the area, his mind, sharpened by decades of battle, trying to piece together the impossible sequence of events. He saw the spot where the Nomu was supposed to be, but there was nothing, not a trace. He saw the scorch marks, the pattern of destruction radiating outwards from his successor. He rushed to Izuku's side, his massive form kneeling. He gently checked for a pulse. It was there, steady and strong. Miraculously, a quick check revealed no new broken bones. In fact, the bones that had been broken moments before seemed better. Not healed, but stabilized, as if some unknown energy had reinforced them at a structural level. What in the world happened here? He breathed, his voice a low rumble of disbelief. Aizawa stirred, groaning as he pushed himself up on one arm. All Might. Midoriya. He rasped, his eyes fixed on the helmet. He saved us. All of us. Nizu and the other pro-heroes began to arrive, their faces a mixture of grim determination and shock at the scale of the destruction. The scene was far worse than anything they had imagined. It looked less like a villain attack and more like the impact side of an orbital weapon. All Might gently scooped Izuku into his arms. His student felt impossibly light. He looked at the golden helmet, an object so alien, so out of place, that it felt like a dream. He could feel a faint energy humming from it, a whisper of cosmic power that made the hair on his arms stand up. He looked from the helmet to the boy in his arms, the boy to whom he had passed on the sacred torch of One for All. A boy who dreamed of being the #1 hero and saving people with a smile. A chilling, profound realization settled over Toshinori Yagi. The villain problem they had been fighting, the struggle for the future of their country, had just become terrifyingly, incomprehensibly small. A single blast had not only saved his students, it had shattered the boundaries of their world. A falling star had landed in their midst. And in its final, desperate spark, it had lit a new, and terrifyingly bright fire. The burden on young Midoriya's shoulders had just increased by a galactic scale, and as All Might looked up at the open, endless blue sky, he could only pray that the boy, his boy, would be strong enough to bear it. The first sensation was not pain. This, in itself, was so profoundly strange that it took Izuku Midoriya a full minute to process. Waking up after a battle, especially one where he'd used One for All, was a familiar and dreaded ritual. It always began with a dull, throbbing inventory of his own brokenness, the screaming protest of shattered phalanges, the deep, grinding ache of a fractured ulna, the fire in the lungs sensation of bruised ribs. Pain was the price of his quirk, the toll he paid for every heroic act. But there was none. He felt whole. More than whole. He felt a deep, resonant hum in the marrow of his bones, a quiet energy that was not the crackling, volatile lightning of One for All, but something smoother, more stable. It felt like a perfectly tuned engine idling just beneath his skin. His eyes fluttered open. The ceiling was a sterile white. The air smelled of antiseptic and Recovery Girl's peculiar brand of herbal tea. He was in the infirmary. That part was familiar. He pushed himself up, expecting a jolt of agony, but found only a slight stiffness. He looked down at his hands, turning them over. No casts. No bandages. No purple and black mottling of deep bruises. He flexed his fingers. They obeyed without a single complaint. Did I not use my quirk? He wondered, his mind a foggy landscape of fractured memories. No. I remember, the Nomu. Aizawa-sensei, the falling star, the helmet. The golden helmet. User consciousness has resumed. Vitals are stable. Neurological activity returning to baseline parameters. The voice was not a sound. It did not travel through the air to his ears. It simply appeared. It bloomed in the center of his mind, a fully formed thought that was not his own. It was calm, impossibly ancient, and layered, like a billion placid voices speaking in perfect, synchronous unison. Izuku froze, his heart seizing in his chest. "Who's there?" he whispered, his voice hoarse. His eyes darted around the empty infirmary. The bed next to his was neatly made. The curtain was drawn back. He was alone. "I am the Xandarian world mind. I am a sentient, living repository containing the collective consciousness, history, and knowledge of the Xandarian people and the Nova Corps. I now reside within your neural framework." Izuku's blood ran cold. Xandarian? Nova Corps? Reside in my neural framework? This had to be a dream. Or a concussion. Maybe one of the villains had a secondary quirk, something that induced hallucinations. He squeezed his eyes shut and shook his head, a desperate attempt to dislodge the phantom voice. "Get out of my head," he muttered, clutching his temples. "That is not possible. The transfer protocol is absolute and irreversible. Upon the final command of Centurion Roman Day, your biosignature was designated as the sole vessel for my consciousness and the inheritor of the Nova Force." The name, Roman Day, pierced through the fog. The alien? The dying warrior in the blue and gold uniform. The man who had looked at him with such desperate hope before shoving that helmet onto his head. It wasn't a dream, the helmet, Izuku said, his voice trembling. The power, that blast. Did I do that? Correct. Your pre-existing energy anomaly, designated One for All, acted as an unprecedented catalyst upon the initial transference of the Nova Force. The resulting energy discharge registered at 1.2 terawatts, an output exponentially greater than any previously recorded Centurion activation. Your body survived the event due to the Nova Force's secondary function, biostructural reinforcement. It stabilized your cellular structure to prevent self-annihilation. Izuku slid off the bed, his legs unsteady. He staggered to the small mirror over the sink. He looked the same. Freckles, wild green-black hair, eyes that were currently wide with terror. But underneath, he could feel it. That hum. That deep, cosmic thrum. What is the Nova Corps? He asked, his reflection staring back at him, a stranger in his own skin. There was a pause, as if the voice were accessing a file. The Nova Corps was a galactic peacekeeping force, operating for over 500,000 Terran cycles with its seat of power on the planet Xandar, capital of the Andromeda Galaxy. Its mandate was the protection of civilian life, the mediation of interstellar conflict, and the enforcement of galactic law. The word hung in the air, heavy and final. Was? Izuku repeated, a knot of dread tightening in his stomach. What do you mean, was? The Nova Corps is extinct. The planet Xandar has been annihilated. The Xandarian people are gone. The entirety of our culture, our history, our collected lives, now exists only within me, and by extension within you. The clinical, dispassionate delivery of the words made them 1,000 times more horrifying. It wasn't a story, it was a statement of fact. A census report of a dead civilization, a billion lives, a city of gold, a fleet of heroes, all reduced to a ghost in his head. The memory from the transfer slammed back into him with the force of a physical blow. The tide of living darkness, the ravenous swarm, the silent screams of a dying world. He stumbled back, his hand flying to his mouth as a wave of nausea and second-hand grief washed over him. He felt the phantom agony of a billion souls he had never met. No, he gasped, leaning against the wall for support. That can't be. It is a statistical and historical reality, the world mind stated, its tone unchanging. Centurion Day was the last active field officer. With his expiration, the line of succession was activated. His final act was to choose a successor based on observed heroic potential. He chose you, Izuku Midoriya. You are the sole inheritor of the Nova Corps' power and its legacy. You are the last Centurion. By the articles of the Nova Charter, under the final protocol, you are, by default, the acting Nova Prime. The title sounded impossibly grand, like something out of a space opera manga. It felt like a crown made of lead, pressing down on him, threatening to crush his skull. Me? I'm a student. I'm 16. My dream is to be the #1 hero, here. On Earth. I can't be in charge of a galactic police force that doesn't even exist anymore. His voice was rising, hysteria creeping into its edges. The weight of it was too much. All Might's power was a heavy enough burden, a legacy of giants he felt he could never live up to. But this was the legacy of an entire dead galaxy. This is a mistake. I'm not a hero, not really. I break myself every time I try. I'm quirkless. No, I have one for all. But I'm not supposed to have this. I'm just Deku. Useless Deku. The spiral of self-doubt, his oldest and cruelest enemy, began. His breathing hitched. His heart hammered against his ribs, a frantic, trapped bird. The room felt like it was closing in, and the hum inside him began to roar. User adrenal and cortisol levels are spiking, the world mind noted, a hint of something new in its tone, not concern, but analytical alert. Your heightened emotional state is causing an unregulated cascade in the Nova Force energy field. Recommend immediate regulation. I can't! Izuku choked out, clutching his chest. The lights in the infirmary flickered violently. The digital clock on the bedside table flashed a jumble of random numbers before going dark. The metal frame of the bed began to vibrate, emitting a low, discordant tone. The 4-bag hanging from its stand, filled with a saline solution, began to glow with a soft, golden light. The power was leaking out of him, responding to his panic like a panicked animal itself. It was wild, untamed. He could feel it building, a pressure behind his eyes, a crackle in the air around him. Your emotional state dictates energy output. Panic creates chaotic, uncontrolled discharges. You must stabilize. Focus. Regulate your respiration. Breathe? He gasped, incredulous. You want me to breathe while you tell me my brain has an alien squatter and I'm the king of a graveyard? The main ceiling light fixture let out a sharp pop, showering the floor with tiny shards of glass. The room was plunged into the dim, gray light of the overcast morning. Affirmative. Inhale for a count of 4 Terran seconds. Hold for 7. Exhale for 8. This physiological action will lower your heart rate and signal to your limbic system that the immediate threat is cognitive, not physical. This will, in turn, stabilize the sympathetic energy cascade. Focus on my voice. Inhale. 1, 2, 3, 4. The voice was a lifeline in a sea of panic. It was so calm, so logical, it was impossible to ignore. Desperate, Izuku squeezed his eyes shut and did as it commanded. He drew in a shaky breath, the air burning in his lungs. Hold. 1, 2, 3. He held it, the pressure in his chest building. Exhale. 1, 2, 3. He let the air out in a long, shuddering sigh. The golden glow in the 4-bag faded. The humming of the bed frame ceased. The frantic energy inside him didn't vanish, but it receded from a roaring bonfire to a manageable flame. He repeated the process. Inhale. Hold. Exhale. The world slowly stopped spinning. Just as a semblance of calm returned, the door to the infirmary slid open with a soft whoosh. All Might, in his skeletal form, stood in the doorway, his face etched with a profound weariness that went beyond his usual fatigue. Beside him, Principal Nisa stood perched on the shoulder of a heavily bandaged Shota Aizawa, who was leaning on a crutch, his visible eye dark and serious. All Might was holding the helmet. It looked different now, away from the chaos of battle. It was a masterpiece of alien craftsmanship. The gold was polished to a mirror shine, intricately etched with geometric patterns that seemed to shift and writhe at the edge of his vision. The star-shaped sigil on its forehead, once dark, now pulsed with a faint, gentle golden light, matching the rhythm of Izuku's own heartbeat. Young Midoriya, All Might said, his voice a low, worried rumble. You're awake. We heard a noise. His piercing blue eyes scanned the room, taking in the burst light fixture, the darkened clock, and the look of sheer, abject terror on his successor's face. I'm sorry, Izuku stammered, gesturing vaguely at the light. I lost control. Nizu's beady eyes gleamed with an unnerving intensity. Lost control of what, precisely, Midoriya-kun? He asked, his tone light and inquisitive, as if discussing a particularly interesting math problem. Your quirk has never manifested in such a manner before. Izuku opened his mouth, but no words came out. How could he possibly explain this? Hi, Principal Nizu, All Might, Aizawa-sensei. So, funny story, an alien gave me his space magic and now I have a super AI living in my head who says I'm the leader of a dead space army. They'd think he'd finally, completely lost his mind. They will not believe you without proof, the world mind supplied helpfully. But they are your designated mentors and authority figures. Withholding this information is strategically unsound. I will assist you. Relay my words. Taking another steadying breath, Izuku looked his teachers in the eye. It's not one for all. Not entirely. It's from the helmet. There's a voice. It's talking to me. Inside my head, Aizawa's expression tightened. A telepathic attack? From one of the villains? No, Izuku said, shaking his head. It's the helmet's operating system. It calls itself the World Mind. He watched their faces, searching for any sign of belief. All Might looked more worried than ever. Aizawa looked skeptical. But Nizu's intelligent eyes widened almost imperceptibly, his whiskers twitching. The impossible was his specialty. Guided by the calm, steady flow of information from the World Mind, Izuku began to explain. He stumbled over the cosmic terms, translating them as best he could. He told them about the Nova Corps, describing them as a galactic police force. He told them about the planet Xander, the capital of a coalition of worlds in another galaxy. He told them about the dying pilot, Roman Day, and his final act. And then, his voice dropping to a near whisper, he told them of the Corps and Xander's destruction. It said they're all gone, Izuku finished, his gaze falling to the floor. The World Mind is the only thing that's left of their entire civilization. And it's inside me now, along with something called the Nova Force. The room was silent, save for the faint hum of the functioning equipment outside. The three pro-heroes stared at him, the weight of his words settling over them like a physical shroud. Aizawa was the first to speak, his voice rough. You're telling us that the explosion at the USJ, the one that took out that monster and half the facility, was you? I think so, Izuku said weakly. The World Mind said my one for all and this Nova Force, they combined. All Might sank onto the edge of the adjacent bed, the frame groaning under his weight even in his small form. He ran a hand down his gaunt face, his expression one of dawning horror. He had given this boy a great and terrible power, a burden that had nearly killed him, the strongest hero in the world. He had done so believing it was the key to saving their society. And now, through a 1 in a trillion chance, the universe had seen fit to place an even greater, more incomprehensible burden upon his successor's shoulders. It was a cosmic cruelty, a galactic police force. All Might breathed, the words tasting like ash. Young Midoriya, do you understand what this means? I think so, Izuku whispered. There are other things out there. Things like that monster that came with the pilot. Things that destroyed a whole planet of heroes. Principal Nizu finally spoke, his voice sharp and clear, cutting through the heavy atmosphere. He hopped down from Aizawa's shoulder onto the bed, his small paws making no sound. This changes everything, he said, his gaze distant, as if he were already calculating probabilities on an astronomical scale. Our entire worldview, our hero's society, has been predicated on the assumption that Earth is the only stage. We fight our villains, we protect our borders, we debate quirk laws. It's all so wonderfully small. He turned his piercing gaze on Izuku. You are telling us, Midoriya-kun, that the villain problem is not confined to our planet. You are telling us that there are threats against which our strongest hero, All Might himself, might be rendered insignificant. Threats that can devour entire worlds. The principal's words were blunt, but they crystallized the situation with terrifying clarity. The League of Villains, all for one, they were local thugs in a universe filled with gods and monsters. Aizawa took a step forward, his crutch thumping on the linoleum. His visible eye was filled with a deep, weary concern that went beyond his usual gruff demeanor. It was the look of a teacher who saw his most vulnerable, self-destructive student being handed a live grenade the size of a planet. "He's a child," Nizu Aizawa said, his voice low and firm. "He's my student. His only concern should be passing his exams and learning to control his quirk without shattering his own body. He is not, and should not be, responsible for the safety of the entire galaxy." And yet, Nizu countered gently, the power is his. The responsibility, whether we deem it appropriate or not, has been conferred. We cannot ignore this. We must understand it. We must prepare him. Prepare him for what? All Might interjected, his voice strained. To fight aliens? To leave Earth? He's a first year at UA High School. His place is here. A new voice entered the conversation, clear and calm inside Izuku's head, and for the first time, he spoke with its authority, his own voice gaining a strange, detached confidence. The threat that destroyed Xander, the world mind calls it the annihilation swarm. It doesn't just conquer worlds. It consumes them. It's a hive mind, a biological plague. The world mind's last tactical analysis before its network collapsed showed the swarm expanding its feeding territory. It is not a question of if they will find their way to this sector of space, but when. He looked at his mentors, his own fear momentarily eclipsed by the cold, hard logic of the world mind. I don't want this. I don't want any of it. But if I'm the only one who has the power to fight it, if I'm the only thing that can stop that from happening to Earth. He didn't need to finish the sentence. The unspoken words hung in the air, then I have to. It was the core of his being, the very definition of Izuku Midoriya. A heavy silence descended once more. It was a silence of paradigm shifts, of worlds expanding and futures rewriting themselves. All Might, the symbol of peace, looked at his successor and saw not just the future #1 hero of Japan, but potentially the last line of defense for the entire planet. Nizu, the master strategist, saw his chessboard expand to an infinite, three-dimensional field. And Aizawa, the weary protector of children, saw his most reckless student about to be thrown into the deepest, darkest ocean imaginable. Izuku looked down at his hands. The same hands that had been bandaged and broken more times than he could count. They felt different now. They felt heavy. He was Izuku Midoriya, the inheritor of One for All, student at UA High. But he was also someone else now. A ghost of a dead empire. A commander with no army. A beacon in a universe that was growing darker by the day. The two destinies swirled within him, a tempest of green lightning and golden starlight. Your training must begin immediately, the world mind stated in the quiet of his mind, its logical voice cutting through his turmoil. The energy you released at the USJ was the equivalent of a galactic flare, a beacon. Anyone with the proper sensors could have detected it. Probability of the annihilation swarm having registered the event, non-zero, and increasing with every cycle. We are no longer hiding, we are a target. Izuku closed his eyes. The dream of putting on a costume and saving people with a smile seemed like a distant, beautiful memory from another life. His life, a life that had ended the moment that golden helmet had slid over his eyes. Training Ground Gamma was a testament to UA's bottomless budget and its flair for the dramatic. It was a sprawling concrete jungle, a labyrinth of towering, unfinished skyscrapers, skeletal steel frameworks, and a tangled web of industrial pipes thick as pythons. It was designed for search and rescue drills, urban combat simulations, and on this particular overcast morning, for a single student to try and tame a star. Izuku Midoriya stood in the center of a wide plaza, feeling impossibly small. The gray concrete beneath his feet felt solid, real, a stark contrast to the churning vortex of cosmic anxiety in his gut. He was dressed in his standard P uniform, which felt flimsy and inadequate, like wearing a swimsuit to explore the Arctic. Standing at a safe, or what they hoped was a safe, distance were his three chaperones, a skeletal All Might, a heavily bandaged Aizawa leaning on his crutch, and Principal Nizu, who was perched atop a concrete barrier, sipping tea from a delicate porcelain cup as if observing a school play. The objective for today is simple, Midoriya-kun, Nizu began, his cheerful voice echoing slightly in the vast, empty space. Control. Before we can even begin to understand the applications of this, Nova Force, we must first establish a baseline. We need to know what you can do, what you can't do, and most importantly, how to ensure you don't accidentally level the entire campus. Aizawa grunted in agreement. Listen up, problem child. You are not to use one for all. Not even a flicker. We have no idea how it will react, and I'd rather not have to explain to the school board why a chunk of the prefecture is now a crater. This is about the alien power only. Is that clear? Why yes, Aizawa-sensei. Izuku squeaked, his posture ramrod straight. His caution is logical, the world mind's voice bloomed in his mind, cool and serene. An uncontrolled synergy event in a populated area would be catastrophically irresponsible. We will begin with the most basic function, the manifestation of the Centurion armor. Armor? Izuku whispered aloud. All Might took a step forward, his expression a mixture of paternal concern and deep-seated worry. What's that, my boy? The voice giving instructions? Izuku nodded, feeling a blush creep up his neck. It was still unnervingly strange to have a co-pilot for his own thoughts. The world line says, we should start with the armor, the uniform that Roman Day was wearing. Nise's whiskers twitched with interest. Fascinating. A uniform made of pure energy? Let's see it then. The armor is an extension of your will, the world mind instructed. It is a focused projection of the Nova Force, stabilized into a solid, protective state. To manifest it, you do not need to command it. You must simply want it. Envision the protection. Feel the need for the shield. The Force will respond to your intent. Intent. The word felt slippery, abstract. Izuku closed his eyes, his brow furrowed in concentration. Okay. Intent. I need protection. I need armor. He pictured the golden helmet, the deep blue and gold uniform. He tried to feel the need for it, but his mind was a maelstrom of conflicting emotions. There was the desperate need to succeed, the terror of failing, the crushing weight of galactic responsibility, and the mortifying embarrassment of having his teachers watch him like some kind of volatile lab experiment. He felt a flicker of warmth across his skin. A faint, golden light shimmered around his hands for a split second, like heat haze, and then vanished. He tried again, gritting his teeth. Armor. Now. Come on. This time, a single golden plate materialized over his right shoulder pauldron, flickered like a faulty hologram, and then dissipated with a sound like deflating static. It's not working, Izuku mumbled, his cheeks burning with shame. Your intent is unfocused, the world mind stated, its tone devoid of judgment but sharp with analysis. You are broadcasting a chaotic blend of desire, anxiety, and performance pressure. The Nova Force is a precision instrument. You are attempting to play it like a drum kit. You must isolate the core desire, protection. Filter out the ancillary emotional noise. Filter out the noise, Izuku repeated, taking a deep breath. It's talking about my anxiety. It's calling my entire personality ancillary emotional noise. He tried one last time, focusing on a single, clear thought, the image of the void Noma's hand reaching for him. The feeling of utter powerlessness, the primal, desperate need for a shield, any shield, to stand between him and oblivion. This time, the effect was stronger. The golden light enveloped him, swirling like a miniature galaxy. The blue and gold uniform began to coalesce over his pea clothes. The star-shaped sigil blazed on his chest. The helmet started to form around his head, and then the image of Aizawa's disappointed glare flashed in his mind, and the entire construct collapsed in on itself with a pathetic fizz. He was left standing in his gym clothes, panting, a thin sheen of sweat on his forehead. Humph, Aizawa grunted. So it's tied to your emotional state. Just like your quirk control. That's problematic. Mizu, however, looked delighted. Oh, this is wonderful. Not your failure, of course, Midoriya-kun, but the implications. A power that is a direct, quantifiable reflection of the user's mental and emotional stability. The psychological profiling alone is a treasure trove. But perhaps we're starting with something too subtle. Let's move on to something more kinetic. Energy projection. A gravimetric particle burst, the world mind supplied. Commonly referred to as a nova blast. It is the most basic offensive tool of a Centurion. Extend your hand, palm outward. Focus the Nova Force into a single point in your palm, then release it with a propulsive thought. Izuku did as he was told. He held out a trembling hand, aiming at a scarred and battered concrete tower 100 meters away. He tried to channel the humming energy inside him, to push it down his arm and into his palm. He thought about a beam of light. He thought fire, a tiny, golden spark shot from his fingertip. It traveled about 5 feet, fizzled out with a sound like a wet firecracker, and vanished. The silence that followed was deafening. Izuku wanted the ground to swallow him whole. He could feel the phantom sensation of Bakugo's mocking laughter, even though he was nowhere nearby. Well, All Might said, forcing a bright, encouraging tone. Every great river starts with a single drop, my boy. A fine first attempt. Your output was 0.001% of standard Centurion capacity, the world mind corrected bluntly. Your focus was diffuse. You are trying to force the energy, like trying to squeeze water from a stone. The energy is already there. You must simply open the dam. Do not think fire. Think push. The intent is not to create, but to release. Frustration began to bubble up inside Izuku, hot and sharp. Frustration at his own incompetence, at the calm, clinical voice in his head, at the crushing weight of expectation. Open the dam? Push? Fine, he'd push. He took a deep breath, glared at the tower, and this time, he didn't think about beams or fire. He focused on the churning frustration inside him, the desperate need to prove he wasn't useless, and he pushed. He felt a lurch in his gut, as if a plug had been pulled. A sphere of brilliant, chaotic golden energy, the size of a basketball, erupted from his palm. It wasn't a beam. It was a raging, unstable cannonball of pure power. It shrieked through the air and slammed into the ground 50 meters short of the target. The result was instantaneous and terrifying. The concrete plaza buckled and exploded upwards. A trench 10 meters long and 3 meters deep was gouged out of the ground, ending in a crater of molten, glowing slag. The shockwave kicked up a cloud of dust and debris that rolled towards the teachers. Aizawa instinctively threw himself in front of Nizu, while All Might simply stood his ground, the wind whipping at his clothes. Izuku stared, horrified, at the destruction he'd wrought with a single, careless thought. His arm throbbed, not with pain, but with a strange, pins and needles emptiness, as if he'd poured too much of himself out at once. Okay, Aizawa said, dusting himself off, his voice dangerously calm. New rule. You aim for the sky from now on. That was quite the improvement. Nizu chirped, peering into the trench with scientific glee. An exponential increase in output. Now, what about mobility? The pilot at the USJ was in a ship, but he was a member of this corps. Surely they possess personal flight capabilities? Correct, said the world mind. The Nova Force can be directed downwards to generate gravimetric thrust. It is the second most fundamental skill after armor manifestation. The principle is identical to the energy blast, but instead of a single release, it requires a sustained, controlled output. Izuku's blood ran cold. Sustained, controlled output. He had just proven he possessed neither of those things. Flight? He stammered. I don't think that's a good idea. Nonsense, Nizu said. We have Aizawa-kun here for safety, and All Might can catch you if you fall. We must test your limits to understand them. Now up you go. Izuku looked at All Might, a desperate plea in his eyes. The former number 1 hero gave him a wobbly thumbs up. Just a little hop, my boy. Crawling before you can walk. Crawling seems like a great idea right now, Izuku thought miserably. He took a deep breath. Okay. Sustained push. Downwards. Gentle. He tried to imagine the energy flowing out of his feet, like the thrusters on a rocket. He focused, channeling that memory of need, of wanting to escape. For a second, nothing happened. Then, with a sudden, violent jolt, the Nova Force kicked in. It wasn't a gentle lift. It was an explosion. He shot upwards 20 feet with the speed of a bullet, a terrified yelp escaping his lips. He flailed his arms, which only served to unbalance him. His controlled, downward thrust became a chaotic, multi-directional mess. He tilted sideways and shot off like a ricocheting pinball, a screaming, green and black comet of panic. Midoriya! Aizawa yelled, his capture weapon already unspooling. Izuku slammed into the side of a concrete tower with a deafening boom, leaving a spiderweb of cracks. The impact, which should have turned his bones to powder, was absorbed by a flickering aura of golden energy that flared around him just before contact. The Worldmind's passive defense systems were the only thing keeping him from becoming a smear on the wall. He pushed off instinctively, which was the wrong thing to do. The propulsive force sent him careening in the opposite direction, straight towards a tangle of massive steel pipes. No. He twisted in midair, arms and legs pinwheeling. He was a passenger in his own body. He couldn't steer, he couldn't stop, he could only react. Cease all output. The Worldmind commanded, its calm voice a stark contrast to Izuku's shrieking terror. You are in an uncontrolled flight cascade. Relax your focus. Let go, but Izuku couldn't let go. His panic was a feedback loop, fueling the erratic thrusts that sent him hurtling through the concrete canyon. This is getting out of hand. All Might tensed, ready to transform and intervene. Wait! Aizawa ordered, his one good eye narrowed in concentration. If he can't get this under control himself, we've learned nothing. His capture weapon shot out like a striking snake, wrapping around Izuku's ankle just as he was about to rocket into another building. The sudden tether jerked him to a halt, leaving him dangling upside down, spinning slowly. The world was a dizzying, upside-down blur. Thank you, Aizawa-sensei, he moaned, feeling sick. Stop thanking me and start listening to that voice in your head, Aizawa growled, slowly lowering him to the ground. This isn't a toy. Just as Izuku's feet touched the cracked concrete, a new voice, one filled with gravel and rage, cut through the air. DKU. Izuku flinched, a Pavlovian response he'd had since he was 4 years old. Standing at the edge of the plaza, drawn by the commotion, was Katsuki Bakugo. He was in his own gym clothes, his hands sparking with tiny explosions, his face a thunderous mask of pure, undiluted confusion. He had clearly seen the whole pathetic display. His red eyes darted from the dangling capture weapon, to the new trench carved in the ground, to the dazed and nauseous expression on Izuku's face. What the hell was that? Bakugo demanded, stalking forward. His voice wasn't just angry, it was laced with a genuine, unnerving bewilderment. That flying. The light. The hole in the damn ground. That wasn't one for all. It wasn't a question. It was a statement. Bakugo, for all his bluster, was a prodigy of combat perception. He knew the look, the feel, the raw, physical nature of One for All. This was something else, something alien. Izuku froze. His teachers exchanged a look. This was an unforeseen complication. Bakugo, this is a private training session, Aizawa said, his tone leaving no room for argument. Leave, not until this damn nerd tells me what's going on. Bakugo jabbed a finger at Izuku, his knuckles white. The explosions in his palms grew larger, more agitated. You've been hiding this? On top of everything else? All that crying and mumbling about being a hero, and you've got another secret power-up? The accusation, the sheer unfairness of it, stung Izuku. It's not. I didn't ask for this, Kaken. Then what is it? Bakugo roared, his frustration boiling over. The ground around his feet began to crackle. You show up with All Might's power, and I accept that. I deal with it. But this glowing space crap? What the hell is that, Deku? Another secret quirk you forgot you had? The question hung in the air, heavy and explosive. Izuku looked at his childhood friend, at the swirling vortex of rage, pride, and a flicker of something he'd never seen in Bakugo's eyes before. Fear. Fear of being left behind. Fear of the unknown. He couldn't tell him. He couldn't just say, oh, an alien died and made me a space cop. It was too insane, too dangerous. It wasn't his secret to tell. I can't explain, Izuku said, his voice barely a whisper. Bakugo's face twisted into a snarl of betrayal. You can't or you won't? After everything, you're still looking down on me, you damn pebble. He turned on his heel and stalked away, his shoulders rigid. Fine, keep your damn secrets. See if I care. But the way he slammed his fist into a nearby wall, leaving a scorch mark and a spiderweb of cracks, told a different story. Izuku watched him go, a familiar ache in his chest. The chasm between them had just grown infinitely wider. Well, that was suboptimal, Niza commented, taking another sip of tea. The encounter left Izuku shaken, his frustration now mixed with a heavy dose of guilt. The world mind's voice cut through the fog. The individual Bakugo represents a significant variable. His emotional volatility and proximity to you make him a security risk. The nature of the Nova Force must remain classified on this planet until a proper threat assessment can be completed. I know, Izuku muttered. He just doesn't understand. He's not the only one, my boy, All Might said gently. None of us do. But we can't stop now. The determination in All Might's voice, the unwavering belief, struck a chord in Izuku. He was failing. He was flailing. But he couldn't give up. The memory of the USJ, of the power he'd unleashed, came back to him. There was a key he was missing. At the USJ, he said, thinking aloud. I used one for all. The world mind said they synergized. Aizawa went rigid. Midoriya, I already told you. No, listen, Izuku insisted, his analytical mind finally kicking into gear, overriding his panic. The Nova Force responds to intent, right? But my intent is all mixed up with fear and anxiety. One for all, it's different. It's simpler. It's the desire to save, passed down and stockpiled. It's pure heroic will. Maybe OFA acts as a focusing lens. A stabilizer for the Nova Force. Niza's eyes gleamed. A fascinating hypothesis. A power that regulates another power. It's too dangerous. All Might protested. We saw what it did. We can't risk an uncontrolled blast like that again. He's right, Aizawa agreed. The risk is too high. But Izuku's mind was racing. He was tired of being a pinball. He was tired of failing. He had to try. Let me try just one more time. A small percentage. Just a tiny bit of one for all. A Delaware smash. Just 1%. Please. I have to know. The three teachers looked at each other. It was Aizawa who finally sighed, a sound of pure resignation. Fine. 1%. You will aim at the sky. If you so much as scorch another rock, this experiment is over, and you're on cleaning duty for a month. Am I understood? Yes, sensei. This was it. Izuku took a deep breath, planting his feet. He closed his eyes, ignoring the vast, empty training ground, ignoring his teachers, ignoring the lingering sting of Bakugo's anger. He reached inside himself. He felt the two powers, distinct and separate. The Nova Force was a vast, tranquil, starlit ocean, deep, ancient, and powerful. One for all was a crackling, raging river of green lightning, wild, energetic, and demanding. He had been trying to dip a cup into the ocean. Now, he would try to divert the river into it. 1%, he thought, letting the familiar red veins snake up his arm. The green lightning of OFA sparked to life. Then, he reached for the Nova Force, not with a command, but with an invitation. He focused on the intent of a Delaware smash, a focus flick, a blast of air. He flicked his finger. What happened next was not a blast of air. The moment the two energies touched, they didn't just mix, they reacted. The 1% of OFA acted like a detonator for a thimbleful of the Nova Force's cosmic power. A wave of energy, not gold, not green, but a brilliant, searing Vidian, erupted from his fingertip. It wasn't a beam or a sphere. It was a visible shockwave, a crescent of shimmering, destructive light. It shrieked past his head, missing his ear by inches, and shot across the training ground. It didn't go up. In his haste, his aim had been off. The wave traveled for half a kilometer in the blink of an eye. It didn't explode on impact. It passed through. A 10-story concrete tower, one of the largest structures in Gamma, stood in its path. The Vidian crescent wave hit it about halfway up. There was no explosion, no crumbling. For a single, silent moment, the tower just changed. The section of concrete and rebar the wave passed through glowed with an ethereal light, then dissolved into fine, glittering dust. The top half of the tower, suddenly bereft of support, hung in the air for a heartbeat before plunging downwards with a cataclysmic, ground-shaking roar, collapsing into a mountain of rubble and dust. Silence. Izuku stood frozen, his finger outstretched, his arm trembling. He stared at the newly created mountain of debris, at the perfectly, impossibly clean cut that had bisected a 10-story building. No, the world mind said, its voice still infuriatingly calm. The synergy between One for All and the Nova Force does not appear to be additive. It is exponential. The resulting energy exhibits properties of molecular disintegration. This is new. All Might was coughing, not from his injury, but from sheer, unadulterated shock. Aizawa's visible eye was wide as a dinner plate. Nizu was staring at the ruin, a slow, slightly terrifying smile spreading across his face. Oh my, the principal said softly. Oh dear. The sheer scale of the destruction washed over Izuku. That was 1%. A flick of his finger. He could have leveled a city block. He could have killed someone. He could have killed everyone here. The power wasn't a tool. It was a weapon of mass destruction, and he was a child holding the trigger. Despair, cold and absolute, washed over him. I can't, he whispered, sinking to his knees. I can't do this. It's too much. It's too big. I'm going to hurt someone. I'm going to destroy everything. He buried his face in his hands, his shoulders shaking. He had failed. Catastrophically. He felt a large, warm hand on his shoulder. He looked up into the worried face of Toshinori Yagi. Yes, you can, my boy, All Might said, his voice soft but firm. Do you think I could control One for All the first day I received it? I blew out 3 walls of my master's dojo just trying to throw a punch. Power, real power, is never easy. It is a beast. And you must tame it. He clenched his fist. You treat it like a new muscle. You work it. You strain it. It will be sore, it will ache, but every day it will get stronger. More obedient. From his other side, the world mind spoke in his mind. His analogy is crude, but the principle is sound. Your error is one of approach. You are treating the Nova Force as an external power to be commanded. It is not. It is now a part of your biology, as fundamental as your own circulation. You do not command your heart to beat. You simply are. You are trying to wrestle the ocean. You must learn to be the tide. Focus on the intent, not the power. You wish to fly. You do not wish to launch. You wish to hover. Feel the desire for weightlessness. Nothing more. Intent, not power. A new muscle. The 2 pieces of advice, one from the heart, one from the mind, clicked together. Logic and emotion. The world mind and All Might. Izuku took a shaky breath and got to his feet. He ignored the devastation he'd caused. He ignored the trembling in his limbs. He closed his eyes and thought of a single, simple thing. He remembered the feeling of Uraraka's quirk, that gentle, liberating weightlessness. He didn't think about thrust or power or pushing. He just focused on that single, simple desire. I want to float. A soft, golden hum emanated from his body. It was quiet, controlled. The frantic energy from before was gone, replaced by a steady thrum. He felt his feet lift from the cracked concrete. Not a launch. A lift. Gentle. Smooth. He opened his eyes. He was hovering. 1 foot off the ground. Then 2. Then 10. He rose slowly, steadily, into the air, with no sound but the soft hum of energy. There was no flailing, no panic. He was as stable as a rock. He looked down at his teachers. All Might had a huge, proud smile on his face, giving him 2 enthusiastic thumbs up. Aizawa had an expression of grudging approval, a high compliment from him. Nizu was clapping his paws together softly. A giddy, incredulous laugh escaped Izuku's lips. He rose higher, above the broken towers and pipes of the training ground. He could see the whole of UA, spread out below him, a sprawling campus of glass and steel. He could see the city beyond it, the cars like tiny metal bugs. He kept rising, the wind cool on his face, until he was looking up not at the top of a training facility, but at the real, endless expanse of the sky. The sun broke through the clouds, bathing him in light. For the first time, he didn't feel the crushing weight of his new power. He felt its freedom. He was suspended between the world he had sworn to protect and the vast, terrifying cosmos he was now a part of. The fear was still there, a cold stone in his gut, but for the first time, it was joined by a flicker of something else. Wonder. He was Izuku Midoriya. And he was learning to fly. The room was cold. It wasn't a physical cold, as the climate control in UA's subterranean levels was impeccably maintained. It was a deep, sterile coldness that clung to the brushed steel walls and the polished obsidian surface of the central briefing table. This was Briefing Room Epsilon, a place designed for crises, not conversations. There were no windows. The only light came from recessed LED strips in the ceiling, casting a shadowless, clinical glow that stripped all warmth from the faces of the 4 people present. Izuku Midoriya sat at the table, his hands clasped so tightly his knuckles were white. Opposite him, All Might, in his skeletal form, looked frail and small, swallowed by the oversized, high-backed chair. Aizawa stood leaning against the wall, his arms crossed over his chest, his bandaged form a statue of grim vigilance. At the head of the table, Principal Niza sat in a specially designed booster seat, a steaming cup of oolong held delicately in his paws, his black eyes missing their usual spark of mischievous intelligence. They were flat, serious, like chips of polished jet. In the center of the table, between them all, sat the helmet, Roman Day's helmet. His helmet. It seemed to absorb the room's light, the intricate golden patterns swirling with a life of their own. The star-shaped sigil on its brow pulsed with a slow, steady rhythm, a silent heartbeat in the tomb-like silence. It was an object of impossible beauty and unimaginable dread. After the disastrous, revelatory training session in Ground Gamma, Niza had convened this meeting. The initial phase of testing the limits was over. Now came the far more terrifying task, understanding the context. The demonstration at Ground Gamma was illuminating. Niza began, his voice cutting through the tension. It established that the synergy between your quirk and the Nova Force is unpredictably powerful, and that your control over the base force is rudimentary and dangerously tied to your emotional state. Izuku flinched, the principal's blunt assessment striking him like a physical blow. However, Niza continued, setting his cup down with a soft click. Power is meaningless without understanding the stakes. You have told us what the world mind has told you, Midoriya-kun. That Xander is gone. That the Nova Core is destroyed. These are words. They are abstract. To formulate a strategy, to truly grasp the nature of the burden that has been placed upon you, we need more. We need to see. He gestured a paw toward the helmet. Can your companion show us? Izuku swallowed, his throat dry. He looked at the helmet, then back at his mentors. He didn't want to see. A part of him, the part that still dreamed of simple heroics and passing exams, wanted to run from this room and never look back. But the quiet, persistent hum of the Nova Force inside him was a constant reminder that there was no running. The principal's request is logical, the world mind's voice echoed in his mind, as calm and clear as ever. A visual representation is the most efficient method for conveying data of this magnitude. The helmet contains the necessary hollow projector. You need only place it on your head to establish a full-spectrum connection, or place your hand upon it to authorize a limited external projection. Opting for the less intimate of the two, Izuku reached out a trembling hand and laid it on the cool, smooth metal of the helmet. It says it can, he whispered. It says, it can show us everything. As his palm made contact, the star sigil glowed brighter. A low hum filled the room, and a beam of pure white light shot up from the helmet, hitting a circular node in the ceiling. The node whirred to life, and the light refracted downwards, expanding to fill the center of the room. The air shimmered, dust motes dancing in the nascent projection. The sterile briefing room dissolved, replaced by the deep, stardusted black of space. They were floating above a planet that defied description. It was a jewel of gold and ivory, its land masses glittering with crystalline cities that soared into the upper atmosphere. Rivers of light pulsed across its surface like veins of liquid starlight. 1,000 different ships, sleek golden fighters, bulky commercial freighters, elegant diplomatic couriers, moved in graceful, intricate ballets through its orbital lanes. It was a vision of a perfect future, a society that had conquered war, poverty, and ugliness. This was Xander, the world mind's voice narrated, no longer confined to Izuku's head but emanating from the projection itself, a chorus of 1 billion serene voices filling the room. The heart of the Nova Empire. home to 12 billion souls from over 300 distinct sentient species. For 500 millennia, it was the beacon of civilization in the Andromeda Galaxy, the seat of the Nova Corps. The scene shifted, zooming in on the planet's surface. They flew through canyons of gleaming white towers, past parks where alien children with skin of blue-green and scaled crimson played under the light of 3 suns. They saw the Nova Corps headquarters, the Grand Spire, a structure of pure, solidified light that pierced the clouds. Golden-clad Centurions patrolled the streets, not as soldiers, but as peacekeepers, their presence reassuring, their interactions with the civilians warm and respectful. It was everything Heroes Society on Earth aspired to be, magnified to a galactic scale. "It's beautiful," All Might breathed, his voice filled with awe. Aizawa said nothing, but his single visible eye was wide, taking in the impossible sight. This was a peace he had only ever dreamed of. It was, the world mind said, and the simple past tense sent a chill down Izuku's spine. Our golden age ended. It began as all things do, as a rumor. A shadow on the edge of the galactic rim, a listening post gone silent. A freighter that never arrived. The holographic sky began to change. The vibrant starfield at the edge of the system seemed to curdle. A patch of blackness, deeper and more absolute than the void of space itself, began to grow. It wasn't an absence of light, it was a presence of darkness. We sent a scout fleet, the world mind continued. 100 of our finest Centurions, led by Nova Prime Tanak Vault. They were to investigate and report. They never returned. We received only one final, fragmented data burst. The projection shifted again. Now they were seeing through the eyes of a Centurion, the HUD flickering with incomprehensible data. Before them was the blackness, now revealed to be not empty space, but a teeming, writhing mass. A tide of biological horrors. It was a fleet, but a living one. Ships of black, jagged chitin, like monstrous insects, pulsed with sickly crimson light from within. They moved not with the grace of technology, but with the twitching, swarming instinct of a locust plague. The sheer scale of it was nauseating. For every golden Nova ship, there were 1,000 of the black, ravenous things. The Annihilation Swarm. Izuku whispered the name, the words feeling profane in his mouth. The battle began. Golden lances of energy shot from the Nova ships, impacting the swarm. But for every vessel they destroyed, which shattered into a shower of black ichor and chitin, 10 more took its place. The swarm responded with volleys of what looked like bioplasma, globules of corrosive, acid-green energy that didn't explode against the Nova shields but ate them, dissolving the golden energy fields like sugar in water. The projection focused on a single Centurion, his face a mask of determined terror. He flew like a golden comet, weaving through the chaos, blasting swarm fighters apart. But then, smaller, winged creatures, like gargantuan hornets made of obsidian and rage, latched onto him. They swarmed him, their scythed limbs tearing at his armor, their maws biting at his energy field. His golden light flickered, sputtered, and was extinguished. His scream was cut short. One by one, the golden lights of the Nova fleet were snuffed out, consumed by the overwhelming tide of darkness. The final image of the data burst was the face of the swarm's leader, not a creature in a command chair, but a vast, planetoid-sized bioorganism, a moon of pulsing flesh and a single, malevolent, continent-spanning red eye. It was a living god of hunger. The data burst ended. The projection returned to the view of Xander, serene and unaware. We understood then, the world line said, a new note in its voice, not emotion, but the data equivalent of a cold, dawning dread. This was not an invasion. It was an extinction event. The swarm did not conquer, it consumed. Every living thing, every drop of water, every ounce of biomass, every joule of energy, all of it was fuel for its endless expansion. It was the universe's predator, and we were its prey. The black tide of the Annihilation Swarm appeared at the edge of the Xandarian system. Evacuate, Aizawa said, his voice a low growl. They must have tried to evacuate. We tried, the world mind confirmed. But the swarm was too fast. Its psychic hive mind coordinated its attack with terrifying efficiency. They did not attack Xander first. They attacked our evacuation routes. They created a cage of death around our system. The projection showed civilian ships, freighters packed with families, desperately trying to flee. They were swatted from the sky like flies, their hulls breached, their occupants consumed by the swarming horrors. The beautiful, peaceful space lanes became a graveyard. Then, the swarm turned its attention to Xander itself. The entire Nova Corps, thousands upon thousands of Centurions, rose to meet them. It was a final, desperate stand. A thin line of gold against an infinite night. The sky of Xander became a firestorm of gold and red, of defiant energy blasts and corrosive plasma. But the most horrifying part was the psychic assault. The swarm does not only fight on the physical plane, the world mind explained, and as it spoke, a low, discordant hum filled the briefing room. Its hive mind projects a psychic miasma. A wave of pure despair. It shows you your greatest fears, your deepest regrets. It breaks your will before it breaks your body. The projection became a chaotic montage of Centurions faltering. A veteran warrior suddenly screaming in terror, see not the swarm, but the ghost of a fallen comrade. A young recruit curling into a ball, weeping for a home he would never see again. Their golden auras flickered and died, not from enemy fire, but from within. Their hope was being eaten. Izuku felt a phantom echo of it in his own mind. A wave of crushing despair, the ghost of a billion dying souls. He felt the grief of the world mind, the agony of watching its children be slaughtered, of its body being devoured. He clutched his head, a gasp escaping his lips. The psychic residue, even filtered through a holographic recording, was a soul-crushing weight. All Might put a hand on his shoulder, the contact a grounding anchor in a sea of cosmic horror. The battle was a rout. The golden line broke. The swarm descended. They did not land. They latched onto the planet's surface like parasites. Great, continent-sized maws opened in their bioships, and vast, fleshy tendrils burrowed into the ground, siphoning the planet's oceans, its atmosphere, its geothermal core. The beautiful crystalline cities crumbled, their light extinguished, their inhabitants consumed. The sounds were the worst part. There were no grand explosions, only a wet, slurping, grinding sound of a world being eaten alive. The final image was of the grand spire, the beacon of Nova power, cracking and collapsing into a cloud of dead light. The projection then zoomed out, showing what was left of Xander. It was no longer a jewel. It was a cracked, gray, lifeless husk of a planet, drifting silently in the void. A cosmic tombstone. The hologram faded. The white lights of the briefing room returned, feeling harsh and intrusive. Silence. It was a profound, suffocating silence, filled with the echoes of planetary death. Aizawa was pale, his jaw clenched so hard a muscle twitched in his cheek. Mizu, for the first time since Izuku had met him, looked utterly still, his teeth forgotten, his beady eyes reflecting a horror that his vast intellect could not process or mitigate. All Might's hand on Izuku's shoulder was trembling, his breathing shallow. But for Izuku, the silence was not empty. It was filled with the screaming ghosts of 12 billion souls. The grief was not second-hand. The world mind had shared the raw, unfiltered data of its own agony. He felt the loss of Xander, as if it were his own home. He felt the death of every Centurion as if they were his own brothers and sisters in arms. He lurched forward, away from All Might's touch, and vomited onto the pristine floor. His body convulsed, retching up nothing but bile, his stomach twisting in knots. The horror was a physical entity inside him, a poison he couldn't expel. He collapsed back into his chair, trembling uncontrollably, sweat beading on his forehead. He stared at his own hands. The same hands he'd used to practice his flight, to manifest a pathetic spark of energy. The same hands he dreamed would one day sign autographs as the #1 hero. How could he have been so stupid? So naive? My dream. He choked out, the words tearing at his throat. His voice was a broken, unrecognizable thing. My dream was to be like you, All Might. To save people with a smile. To stop purse snatchers. To save people from falling debris. To be a symbol of peace for one city. One country. He looked up, his eyes wild with terror and despair, locking onto All Might. What is that, compared to this? He gestured at the empty space where the hologram had been. How can I even think about being a hero here, on this little planet, when that is out there? That thing, it doesn't just kill people. It erases them. It eats worlds. And I'm supposed to, what? Stop it? Me? A hysterical, broken laugh escaped his lips. Me? I'm just a kid who breaks his bones every time he tries to be a hero. I couldn't even manifest the armor. I can barely fly in a straight line. That thing ate an entire army of real heroes, heroes who had done this for thousands of years. What chance do I have? What chance does Earth have? He buried his face in his hands, his shoulders shaking with violent sobs. The carefully constructed walls of his heroic resolve, built over years of dreaming and striving, had been reduced to rubble. It's a mistake, he wept. Roman Day made a mistake. He should have picked someone else. A pro-hero. You, All Might. He should have picked you. I can't do this. I'm not a Nova Prime. I'm just Deku. All Might looked at the broken boy, and his heart ached with a pain deeper than any injury he had ever sustained. He saw himself in that despair. He remembered the weight of one for all settling on his own quirkless shoulders, the ghost of his master, Nana Shimura, urging him forward, the feeling of being a fraud in a giant's shoes. He walked around the table and knelt in front of his successor, ignoring the disgusted look from Aizawa at the mess on the floor. He placed his large, bony hands on Izuku's trembling shoulders, forcing the boy to look at him. You're right, Toshinori Yagi said, his voice soft but resonant. You are absolutely right to be afraid. To feel overwhelmed. Any sane person would be. To look upon that cosmic horror, and not feel despair would make you a monster, not a hero. Izuku stared at him, tears streaming down his face, confusion warring with his grief. This wasn't the booming reassurance he expected from the symbol of peace. When my master passed her power to me, All Might continued, his gaze distant, I was your age. I was quirkless. A scrawny kid with nothing but a foolish dream. When she told me what I would have to face, the evil she had fought her entire life. I was terrified. I told her the same thing you just told me. That she'd made a mistake. That I wasn't strong enough. That I couldn't possibly live up to the heroes who came before me. He squeezed Izuku's shoulders gently. She told me something then that I have never forgotten. She told me that a hero isn't the one who feels no fear. A hero is the one who stands up despite the fear, the one who acts when every instinct is screaming to run. He paused, letting the words sink in. Izuku's sobs began to subside, replaced by shaky, hitching breaths. Your dream is not small, young Midoriya, All Might said, his voice gaining strength, the old fire returning to his eyes. It is the purest, most noble dream there is. To save people. To be a symbol of hope. You think that dream is limited by geography? By the size of the threat? He shook his head, a faint smile gracing his lips. A symbol of peace is not defined by the size of their parish, but by the strength of their heart. Whether you save a single person from a burning building or a billion souls from a cosmic horror, the principle is the same. The choice is the same. You stand up when others cannot. You offer a hand when others would run. You become the shield for the defenseless. That is the core of it. That is everything. He looked Izuku straight in the eye, his gaze unwavering. That thing out there, the swarm, it feeds on despair. It wins by convincing you that you are small, that you are helpless, that hope is a lie. That is its true weapon. You cannot let it win that battle here, in this room. Not inside you. He leaned in closer, his voice dropping to a powerful whisper. You are not just a kid who breaks his bones. You are the boy who rushed to save Bakugo from the sludge villain when all the pros stood frozen. You are the boy who shielded a dying stranger from a monster without a moment's hesitation. You are the 9th inheritor of One for All. And now, it seems you are something more. The power chose you, Izuku Midoriya. Both of them. Not because you were perfect, but because when it mattered most you shone. The words wrapped around Izuku's shattered spirit like a warm, strong bandage. They didn't magically erase the horror or the fear, but they gave him something to hold on to. A foundation, a truth he recognized in the core of his being. He wasn't a galactic commander. He wasn't Nova Prime. He was Izuku Midoriya, a hero in training. And his job was to save people. The scale had changed, but the job description hadn't. He wiped his eyes with the back of his sleeve, taking a deep, shuddering breath. But how? He asked, his voice still shaky but no longer broken. Where do we even start? Mizu, who had been listening with rapt attention, finally stirred. He cleared his throat, his pragmatic nature reasserting itself. Inspiration is vital, all might, but it is not a strategy. Midoriya-kun asks the correct question. He turned his sharp gaze back to Izuku. The Nova Corps is gone. But are we certain that Centurion Day was the absolute last survivor? Are there no others? No forgotten outposts? No long-range patrols that were outside the system when the swarm attacked? The question hung in the air. Izuku closed his eyes, directing the query inward. The principal's inquiry is logical, the world mind replied. The core of the Nova Corps was destroyed at Sander. However, thousands of Centurions were on assignment across the galaxy. Many would have been recalled, and we must assume they were intercepted and annihilated. But the galaxy is vast. The probability of scattered survivors, cut off and isolated, is not zero. There might be others, Izuku said, opening his eyes. The world mind says it's possible. Indeed, the voice in his head continued. In the aftermath of the attack, I initiated a passive, low-energy scan for any active Nova Force signatures. The search has been fruitless for a long time. However, during the energy cascade event at the USJ, your Vidian blast acted as a power source, temporarily boosting my processing and sensory capabilities by a factor of 10,000. In that brief window, I detected something. A new hologram shimmered into existence above the helmet. It was a star chart of Earth's solar system. A tiny, pulsing red light appeared in the asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter. A faint, pre-recorded, looping nova distress signal, the world mind explained. Its power source is failing, and the signal is degraded. But its signature is authentic. It originates from a derelict deep space listening post, designated Outpost 3 to 7. It has been silent for over 3 Terran years. But the signal is a breadcrumb. It is, at present, our only lead in the entire universe. The four of them stared at the pulsing red light. It was so small, so distant. A tiny flicker of hope in an overwhelming darkness. Izuku looked at the helmet, then at the hologram, then at the faces of his teachers. The fear was still there, a cold knot in his stomach. The grief for Xander was a fresh, open wound. But All Might's words had given him a foothold. Mizu's question had given him a direction. And the world mind had given him a target. The burden hadn't shrunk, but he felt a little stronger standing under it. He wasn't alone. He reached out and placed his hand on the helmet once more. This time, it did not feel like a crown of lead. It felt like a shield. His shield. Okay, Izuku said, his voice quiet but firm, a single spark of iron returning to its core. Then that's where I have to go. The week that followed the holographic horror show in Briefing Room Epsilon was a blur of frantic, clandestine activity. UA High School, on the surface, continued its rigorous academic and heroic curriculum. Students attended classes, sparred in the gymnasiums, and complained about homework. But beneath that veneer of normalcy, a secret, desperate mission was being planned in the school's deepest, most secure levels. The mission was codenamed Project Lodestar. Its sole operative, Izuku Midoriya. Its destination, a derelict alien listening post in the asteroid belt. Its objective, to make first contact with any potential survivors of the Nova Corps, and in doing so, take the first terrifying step onto a galactic stage. The preparations were a strange mix of cutting-edge hero support and improvised science fiction. Mei Hatsum, from the support course, was brought into the fold under the tightest of secrecy. Mizu, with a glint in his eye, had framed it to her as a challenge to build a deep space communications relay for a new type of long-range sensory quirk. Mei, whose passion for her babies blissfully overrode any need for logical explanations, had thrown herself into the task with explosive enthusiasm. She worked with the world mind, which fed her advanced schematics through Izuku, resulting in a device that looked like a cross between a satellite dish and a steampunk spider. It was designed to amplify the distress beacon from Outpost 3 to 7 and hopefully establish a two-way communication link once Izuku was closer. Power Loader grumbled about the impossible energy requirements and alien metallurgical principles, but the challenge invigorated him. All Might hovered over everything like a nervous hen, offering encouragement that was equal parts inspiring and stressful. Aizawa, meanwhile, focused on the practicalities. He drilled Izuku relentlessly on environmental awareness, emergency protocols, and most importantly, emotional regulation. His training sessions were grueling, forcing Izuku to maintain a stable hover while Aizawa threw everything from high-intensity flashbangs to insults about his parentage at him, all to teach him to keep the Nova Force from flaring in response to stress. The void doesn't care about your feelings, problem child, Aizawa would rasp, after Izuku accidentally sent a pulse of gravimetric energy into the ceiling. It won't pat you on the back for trying hard. Control or you die. It's that simple. Through it all, the world mind was a constant, calm presence in Izuku's mind. It was his tutor, his encyclopedia, his flight computer. It taught him the basics of interstellar navigation, pointing out constellations he'd only ever seen in textbooks. It instructed him on how to use the Nova Force to create a stable, breathable atmospheric shell around his body and how to metabolize ambient cosmic radiation for energy, theoretically allowing him to survive indefinitely in the vacuum of space. Your body is now a self-contained bioreactor, it explained. The Nova Force provides for your physiological needs. Your primary limitations are no longer biological, but psychological, focus and endurance. But as the day of departure approached, the weight of the mission began to press down on Izuku in a far more personal way. This wasn't just a training exercise. He was leaving. He was leaving Earth, his friends, his mom, his entire world, to chase a ghost in the dark. The goodbyes were the hardest part. They had to be lies, or at least truths wrapped in layers of omission. He found Achiko Uraraka and Tenya Ida in the 1A common room, studying for an upcoming English test. They looked up as he approached, their smiles warm and genuine. Deku-kun, you're just in time to save us from present mixed verb tenses. Uraraka chirped, gesturing to a seat. Indeed, Midoriya-kun, Ida said, chopping the air with his hand. Your analytical prowess would be a great asset in deciphering these complex grammatical structures. Izuku's heart twisted. Their world was still about homework and classes. Their biggest worry was a pop quiz. He envied them with an ache so profound it was almost a physical pain. Actually, he said, forcing a smile that felt brittle, I came to tell you guys something. I've been selected for a special off-campus work study. It's with a new hero agency that specializes in long-range reconnaissance and rescue. It's very intensive. I'm going to be gone for a little while. Maybe a week or two. The lie tasted like acid. Every word was a careful construction, a half-truth designed by Nisa to be plausible enough to quell suspicion. Uraraka's smile faltered. Oh. A week? That's a long time. Is it dangerous? Her round face was etched with genuine concern. All hero work carries an element of risk, Ida stated, though his posture stiffened slightly. But this must be a great honor, Midoriya-kun. To be selected as a first year, you must have impressed the faculty immensely. Something like that, Izuku mumbled, rubbing the back of his neck. I just wanted to tell you both in person. And to say, be safe. And study hard. Of course we will, Uraraka said, her optimism bouncing back. She pumped a fist. You go out there and be the best recon hero ever, Deku-kun. We'll hold down the fort here. We expect a full report on their operational procedures upon your return. Ida added, pushing his glasses up his nose. They were so supportive, so proud. And they had no idea he was about to travel millions of kilometers into a hostile void on a mission that could very well get him killed. The guilt was a physical weight. He wanted to tell them everything. He wanted to tell Uraraka not to worry, to tell Ida that the procedures he'd be learning were from a dead alien civilization. But he couldn't. He was already living in a different world. He said his goodbyes, promising to text when he could, and walked away, their cheerful waves feeling like daggers in his back. The last, and most difficult, task was the letter to his mother. He sat at his desk in his All Might-themed room, staring at a blank sheet of paper for over an hour. How could he possibly write this? He couldn't tell her the truth. The knowledge would break her. But he couldn't just vanish. In the end, he wrote a version of the same lie he told his friends, embellishing it with details to soothe the mother's worry. He wrote about a state-of-the-art training facility in a remote, shielded location, about how All Might himself had recommended him for this once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. He filled the page with reassurances, with promises to be safe, with love and gratitude for everything she had done for him. He told her he was finally, truly on the path to becoming the hero he'd always wanted to be. Every word felt like a betrayal. He folded the letter, placed it in an envelope addressed to her, and left it on his pillow. He took one last look around his room, at the posters of his idol, at the shelves of hero figurines, at the life he was about to leave behind. It felt like a museum of a boy he used to be. Is the emotional farewell ritual complete? The world mind asked, its tone as neutral as ever. Optimal launch window is in 2.7 hours. We must depart. I know, Izuku whispered to the empty room. I'm ready. He wasn't ready. Not even close. The launch site was not a gleaming NASA-style complex. It was the roof of UA's tallest administrative building, chosen for its height and clear line of sight to the sky. The night was clear and cold, the stars brilliant pinpricks in the ink-black sky, unobscured by the city lights far below. All Might stood beside him, a heavy, insulated cloak wrapped around his skeletal form against the chill. He wasn't smiling. Everything is in place, All Might said, his voice a low rumble. Hatsum's relay is synced to the Deep Space Network. We'll be able to monitor your vital signs and the integrity of your atmospheric shell. We won't be able to talk to you until you get much closer to the target. The signal lag will be too great. But we will be watching. He placed a hand on Izuku's shoulder. Remember your training. Control your emotions. Trust the world mind. And come back, my boy. You come back. I will, Izuku said, his voice firmer than he felt. He looked up at the sky. At the faint, milky band of the galaxy. Somewhere out there, past the moon, past Mars, was his destination. It is time, the world mind prompted. Initiate ascent protocol. Initial thrust will be a sustained 15% 1 for all/Nova Force synergy. This will allow us to exit the planet's significant gravity well with maximum efficiency. Once we clear the exosphere, we will transition to pure Nova Force for sustained travel. Are you prepared to handle the G-forces? I think so, Izuku said. He practiced this in a centrifuge that Cementos had built, a brutal machine that had left him dizzy and nauseous for hours. This would be the real thing. He took a deep breath, the cold night air filling his lungs one last time. He gave All Might a final, determined nod. Then, he focused inward. The change was instantaneous. The swirling, Vidian energy of the synergy enveloped him. It wasn't the wild, uncontrolled blast from ground gamma. This was focused, contained, a powerful, humming aura of green and gold light that pushed back the night's chill. It didn't feel like armor, but like a second skin of pure power. He pushed off from the roof. There was no sound, no explosion. Just a silent, impossibly fast ascent. The roof, All Might's worried face, the entire UA campus, it all shrank with breathtaking speed. He was a Vidian comet, a silent rocket streaking upwards through the stratosphere. The G-forces pressed him from all sides, a crushing weight that tried to flatten him, but the Nova Force reinforced his body, his bones and organs held in a cradle of protective energy. In seconds, the blue haze of the atmosphere thinned, giving way to the velvet black of space. And then, he was through. He floated in the silent, utter stillness of low Earth orbit, and beheld a sight that shattered his soul. Below him, suspended in the void, was the Earth. It was not the flat map from his geography books or the pale blue dot from science documentaries. It was a living, breathing marvel of impossible beauty, a swirl of brilliant white clouds over an ocean of the deepest, most vibrant blue he had ever seen. He could see the curve of the continents, the glittering web of city lights on the night side, the angry red eye of a hurricane churning over the sea. It was so beautiful. And so fragile. He saw Japan, his home, a delicate archipelago nestled against the vastness of the Pacific. He saw the faint golden glow of the rising sun touching the edge of the world. He was a boy from Muzurifu, who had dreamed of protecting his small corner of this magnificent, living jewel. The full weight of what he had seen in the briefing room, the image of Xander's dead, gray husk, slammed into him with the force of a physical blow. The thought of the annihilation swarm touching this place, of those ravenous maws latching onto this perfect blue sphere, of these oceans being siphoned away and these lights being extinguished. It was a horror beyond reckoning. He felt a single tear escape his eye, freezing instantly into a tiny, glittering crystal that drifted away into the void. His mission, which had felt like an abstract, terrifying burden, suddenly crystallized into something fierce and primal. It wasn't about the Nova Corps. It wasn't about a dead alien's legacy. It was about this, about protecting the beautiful, fragile, irreplaceable world that hung beneath him. Your emotional state is elevating, but your energy output remains stable, the world mind observed. This indicates your resolve is solidifying. A positive development. We are clear of the gravity well, transitioning to Nova Drive. The crackling green lightning of One for All receded, folded back inside him like a sleeping dragon. The Vidian aura softened into a pure, steady gold. He felt a gentle but inexorable push from behind. He was moving again, accelerating away from his home, away from the sun, plunging deeper into the black. The journey was a masterclass in cosmic loneliness. Time lost all meaning. There was no day or night, only the constant, silent presence of the distant stars. The sun shrank behind him, becoming just the brightest star in a field of billions. The earth became a blue marble, then a blue star, then just another point of light. He was utterly, completely alone. His only companion was the voice in his head. The world mind, a ghost of a dead civilization, became his anchor. It was a strange, developing relationship. The world mind was not conversational. It did not offer comfort or encouragement in the way All Might did. It offered data. To your galactic port, you will observe the constellation you call Orion, it would state. The red giant Betelgeuse is approximately 640 light-years from your current position. If it were to go supernova, its radiation would likely sterilize your planet. Probability within the next 100,000 Terran cycles, 73.4%. That's comforting, Izuku muttered into the silence, his voice sounding small and thin. It is a statement of fact, not a tool for comfort. The universe is inherently volatile. Understanding this volatility is the first step to surviving it. He flew past the moon, a silent, pockmarked giant. He saw the faint lights of a lunar colony, a testament to humanity's own small steps into the void. They seemed so brave, so fragile. He felt a fierce, protective surge for them, too. Mars was a disappointment. A cold, red, dusty ball that looked dead and lonely. He steered clear of its orbit, following the course plotted by the world mind. He spent the days practicing. He flew in lazy circles, in sharp, banking turns. He learned to summon the armor, the golden plates and blue uniform coalescing over his body with increasing speed and stability. He practiced small, controlled nova blasts, firing tiny golden sparks at distant asteroids, learning to modulate the power from a gentle push to a sharp, percussive pop. He was clumsy. He was slow, but he was learning. The loneliness, however, was a physical presence. It was a cold that seeped into his bones, a silence so profound it rang in his ears. He thought of his friends, of their laughter in the common room. He thought of his mother, probably just now finding his letter, her heart breaking with worry no matter how many reassurances he'd written. The guilt was a constant, gnawing companion. Was he doing the right thing? Was this insane, desperate quest worth the pain he was causing? Accessing your psychological profile, the world mind said, interrupting his spiraling thoughts. Your cortisol levels indicate prolonged stress due to social isolation. This is a common affliction among solitary deep space operatives. Historical data suggests engaging in a familiar, structured, cognitive task can alleviate these symptoms. Recite your planet's periodic table. What? Why? It is a structured system of logic with which you are familiar. The act of recitation will engage your prefrontal cortex and reduce activity in the amygdala, thereby lowering your stress response. Begin with hydrogen. Hesitantly, Izuku began. Hydrogen. Helium. Lithium. Beryllium. It was ridiculous. He was floating in the middle of a cosmic graveyard, millions of miles from home, reciting chemistry tables to an alien ghost in his head. But as he continued, a strange thing happened. The world mind was right. The simple, logical progression of the elements was calming. It was a piece of home. A piece of the structured, understandable world he had left behind. As he reached Oganesson, the edge of human discovery, the world mind spoke again. Your knowledge is limited to 118 elements. The Nova Empire had identified and catalogued 327 stable elements, many of which form the basis for our advanced technology. Shall I begin with element 119, Xandarium? Its primary isotope has a half-life of 1.2 million Terran years and is the foundational component of. Izuku smiled, a genuine, tired smile. Maybe later, he said. The days bled into one another. He slept in short, dreamless bursts, his body held in a safe, warm cocoon of Nova energy. He ate by flying through faint, almost invisible nebular clouds, the world mind guiding him to pockets of hydrogen and other trace elements that the Nova force could convert into sustenance. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the world mind announced, "We are approaching the coordinates of the distress signal." Transitioning from Nova drive to tactical approach, the asteroid field presents a significant navigational hazard. Active piloting will be required. Before him, the void was no longer empty. It was a slow, chaotic dance of rock and ice. Asteroids ranging from the size of a fist to the size of a mountain drifted silently through space. This was the belt. This was the dragon's lair. I see it, Izuku breathed, his senses suddenly on high alert. He navigated the field with a new, hard-won grace. He weaved around larger chunks of rock, his body rolling and banking with a precision that would have been impossible a week ago. He was no longer just a passenger. He was a pilot. The signal is stronger now, the world mind stated. But the power source is fluctuating wildly. It is on the verge of total failure. There. Bearing 37.5, declination 12.2. Visual confirmation. Izuku followed the coordinates and saw it. It wasn't a station so much as a scar. A jagged piece of rock, larger than the others, had been hollowed out. A structure of dark, pitted metal was built into it, almost perfectly camouflaged. It was a thing of sharp angles and sensory dishes, all of them dark and lifeless save for a single, tiny antenna that was pulsing with a faint, pathetic red light. Outpost 3 to 7. It looked dead. Utterly and completely dead. A tomb adrift in a sea of tombs. A profound sense of disappointment and despair washed over him. He had come all this way, left his entire life behind, for nothing. Another dead end. Another ghost. Wait, the world mind said, its voice for the first time holding a flicker of something other than pure logic. I am detecting trace energy signatures. Not from the station's main power, which is offline. These are biological. Faint but present. Life support systems appear to be running on an emergency backup, but at critical levels. There are survivors. The words hit Izuku like a jolt of pure adrenaline. Survivors. He wasn't alone anymore.